Hi, folks. Today I'm going to do a reading about the upcoming full moon. And as I like to do, typically I'm going to use the moon sign as the ascendant and read the chart from there mainly. In this case, I have already looked at this chart quite a bit because I actually already made this video, but unfortunately, Zoom, the software I'm using, decided to glitch out horribly, and so you can't see the chart in that video or anything I'm pointing to. So I'm back at it for a second go, and lo and behold, Mercury is not retrograde, so we don't have that little excuse to point to. Anyway, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in this chart, so I'm just going to get right to it here. So basically, the first thing we notice is, of course, Cancer as our ascendant, which means obviously that the ascendant is somewhat emphasized. Now, like I've said in other videos, normally what I would do is I'd look at the moon's 12th part and see that house as a more emphasized kind of first house sort of theme instead of just the first house. But in this case, the moon by 12th part is actually just in the sign of Cancer. So this is definitely a first house emphasis here. And we also have the north node, south node, on the 1-7 axis. So again, really emphasizing that quite a bit. And we also, I'll just point out real quick, we also have Mars as the Atmakaraka for this chart. And again, the full moon chart will last, the influences will last roughly 2 weeks and kind of bleed over into the new moon as well. So yeah, what is going on here then with this first house stuff? Well, it's really interesting because the moon is actually going to apply to an opposition with Saturn, which is aspecting it about 10 degrees out. Excuse me. And this situation is such that Saturn is both the 7th and the 8th lord. Saturn is dignified in its own sign and so on, but this is still a pretty tense, engaging aspect, right? It's a confrontation of sorts. So this is a situation in which partnerships and marriages and desires and things like that, there's going to be some obstacles and delays, and there's going to be some sort of like definite confrontation or crisis surrounding this stuff for some of us, right? There's going to be sort of like a realization of, how things actually are. And, we're going to have to be like sort of patient, and we're going to have to kind of like just confront whatever limitations are present. But there's kind of a theme here of things being sort of like drudged up, so to speak, things that were hidden, things that were obscured, things that were manipulated and so on, being like really drudged up and having to come to terms with sort of the harsh reality of things, especially around partnerships and desires and so on. And that Saturn is the 8th lord, right? That's one of the houses too that deals with like secrets and hidden things. So there's kind of a confrontation there with stuff that maybe we've been hiding from or running away from, and sort of it's going to like maybe more forcefully and even possibly tragically force us to confront it during this full moon period. And the moon is also in the bounds of Mars, which also gives us kind of a particularly, just a martial emphasis. So there's kind of a potential for like impatience and stuff. Mars is fallen in the sign of Cancer, so the martial bounds in Cancer are a little problematic, to say the least. They're kind of overly emotional, or take things overly personal. So there may be an intensity here to the emotional life and whatnot. And I don't know. I'm kind of lazy and I didn't check the astronomy properly, but this might be like some kind of partial eclipse or something, since they're fairly close to the nodes. And so, when we have any sort of like kind of nodal eclipse energy going on with the moon, the full moon or new moon or whatever, we get a situation in which here, the moon will be obscured by the sun, or by the angle or whatever. And so basically what happens is, it sort of causes us to have to confront the results of our desires and actions and appetites and things like that. And I'm not talking about like a lot of people get the spiritual thing pretty wrong, and they think that like, oh, sex is bad, or like it's bad to have desires or whatever, and things like that. And the truth is, it's perfectly natural to have desires, and it's not really for us to judge others' desires and what they're doing and whatnot. You really don't know what is good for any individual person. So that's something that's kind of wildly misunderstood. So when I say like desires and things, I'm talking, and appetites and things like that, I'm talking more in just in terms of like what we like ravenously chase after, like without any sort of end in sight or any sort of conclusion in sight. And so we might be forced to like kind of violently confront those kinds of things. And then, after the moon hits Saturn, it'll go closer to that node. And so we'll kind of be in more of a territory of, like ravenousness, like really ravenously trying to understand who we are, and like forcing our hand to become maybe more than what we are, and just going to these extremes and trying out different things, like radically different things, sort of experimenting and stuff like that. Uranus is actually square those nodes. Where's Uranus? And retrograde. So Uranus kind of also has a big influence in the energies of this chart. And so what that means is it's kind of more of what I said, this retrograde Uranus, this desire to break free of any and all limitations, to transcend boundaries and borders and see beyond the two-dimensional plane that we often kind of exist in psychologically, this like right and wrong dichotomy. But there's kind of an extremism going on there. There's something ravenous about it. There's really upsetting the status quo happening in this search for our identity and stuff. And as a result, there may be a radical rejection of any and all desires, or of our partnerships or things like that, or sex, or just sort of like there might be some kind of like rejection or fear with the South Node and with Saturn here of, kind of like, I don't know, waiting things out, waiting out the storm. But either way, it's like an extreme dissatisfaction with the other and with desires, for sure. It's some sort of extreme dissatisfaction with that kind of realm of life and whatnot. Of course, there could also be a lot of things in relationship realm being like really drudged up from the past. Old partnerships and things may sort of come into our life again, for better or worse. It's interesting because this free software doesn't have Navamsha, but I write it down next to me on this little notepad here. And so Saturn is in the Aries Navamsha. So Saturn is in the 10th house and in the Aries Navamsha. So that can also represent sort of like an extreme amount of impatience that we might have to deal with, especially again around partnership and, the unknown, the 8th house, or what we perceive others as having too. Like we trying to sort of like get what others have, that kind of a thing. But there's some sort of like disappointment factor there, I think. And Saturn in Aries and Navamsha means there's going to be a lot of frustration, a lot of impatience, and potentially in the possibility of all this stuff in the 7th house relationship realm to kind of impede our work and our actions and even our public life and that sort of a thing. So all wonderful things to keep in mind, right? I think I should start advertising my astrology and tarot, probably as like a no bullshit astrology and tarot, because I really don't like to sugarcoat things. I do not like to do it. The world is what it is, and I do my best to just see what the cards in the chart show. So I'm going to give it to you straight, man. Okay, so Leo is the 2nd house, and we see the sun with Saturn, the 8th lord. So we have the 2nd lord and 8th lord coming together, kind of, forming something important within that axis. And, the sun is going to obscure Saturn by making Saturn combust soon and whatnot. So there may be some struggle with resources, some struggle with money and stuff. There may be a partner trying to take money from you, or sort of somehow whoever may be taking their chasing their purpose and power outside themselves to the point where it's just getting like lost in sort of a void of misanthropy and emotional extremism. And, you know, there's kind of a lot of stuff around the eighth house and the eighth lord that has to do with catharsis and not letting go of things. It can be too much like retention, like if you're constipated, right? The colon, which is kind of an eighth house thing by extension, can be obstructed and whatnot. And psychologically, all that means is that you're holding on to something, whether it's like a deep-seated guilt or a deep-seated trauma or whatever. And so that kind of thing could be like a major factor here. So there may be a rejection of that stuff or an inability to deal with it or a fleeing from it because of the south node. And then there's like a ravenous obsession with the self, possibly. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to skip around a bit here. When I originally did this video, the one that got screwed up, I spent a lot of time on the sixth house. And so actually, I'm just going to jump to that sixth house and talk a lot about that sixth house. It's very interesting. It really drew my attention. And we have the third lord Mercury in the sixth house, and Mercury is also the 12th lord actually as well. So there's an interesting thing where Mercury is, you know, kind of a malefic lord for this ascendant, ruling a semi-malefic house and a more malefic house, and he's in a malefic house. So on the one hand, this can really obstruct a person's enemies and stuff, but it can also show, because Jupiter, the sixth lord, is so powerful there, that basically enemies and things can be sort of like a suck on your finances and your energies and stuff. There may be a lot of power that enemies have. There may also be a theme of you know, just like losing a lot of energy and power and freedom to having to deal with like sort of the annoying things that creep up on us in life, usually because we were being too expansive or too haughty or too arrogant, you know? So that can be simple things like if you just really neglected to like take care of your house, or your house needs like a new roof, so you have to sink a bunch of money into it, or you just like never took care of your car properly, or your shoes are falling apart or whatever. You're not dressing properly for, you know, the cold. But the point is like, this is a huge energy suck on us in general for this new moon period. And so it's kind of a situation in where a lot of like financial opportunity and the possibility of like trading and merchandising and stuff like that can kind of like be really obstructed in general, you know? Now, it's not going to be anything necessarily huge because it's Jupiter and it's in good dignity and stuff. So it's not going to be like a majorly like horrible set of circumstances by any means, but it's a soul suck, you know? It's kind of a soul sucking thing. There may be a lot of shitty, annoying things that we just kind of have to deal with, you know? And so our faith might go out the window. We might start to like really question our belief system, our faith, our relationship with God. And we have a repetition of that with Mars, right? The natural significator of the sixth in the ninth house, ruled by Jupiter. So we have the ninth lord and we have Mars kind of coming together in a way. And this is, I talked about this in my previous video that got screwed up, as like righteous action, like the need for righteous action. Because Mars is the fifth lord and the 10th lord. Right? He is a lord of action, and he's the lord of risk and creativity and freedom, right? So Mars in the ninth like this is potentially a very powerful situation. It's called a Raj Yoga in Indian astrology. And basically what it shows is that the potential for basically being called to break free of social conventions and belief systems that are just no longer relevant and no longer serving a greater, deeper, more profound, heartfelt purpose. It's Pisces. It's a sign that's deeply emotional. It's a sign that deals with the collective crisis, with the crumbling of structures, right? With the breakdown of things. And we even have Pluto. Conjunct this Jupiter-Mercury thing by Antisha. So basically what we get there, right, is an increased potentiality for that. And we also have Saturn making a third aspect to Mars, which is potentially here a somewhat of a yoga breaker, somewhat. Because Saturn and Mars there's too much enmity between them to really help each other in like 99% of situations. But in this case, it's not a total breaker because of the rules, which I don't want to go into. But I think that I would say too that like this kind of adds to that breaking away and becoming dissatisfied with sort of like a false banner of what's right, a false morality, and just being really, being like, I need to do something more. And this could come out as like leaving your job, right? The 9th is the 12th from the 10th. So endings of job, leaving your job because you're just frustrated because it's like, I need this job, but they're also a bunch of crooks and they're doing stuff that is harmful to the world. And this can also be a situation where frustration might reign supreme really hard. And because of the nodal emphasis in the first, 7th axis, there may be not a clear view of things. And so people might be just like in anger and aggression, breaking free of their jobs, having animosity toward their teachers or their preceptors or their gurus, if that's, part of their life, and so on. So these are all like 6th house, 9th house, and Mars, and even 8th house sort of things, as Saturn's the 8th lord getting in there. But there may be too a false persona that's been abounding in one's life with this Saturn stuff, like a false mask, like putting on this air of promising things, but meanwhile it's really just kind of totally bullshit or whatever. So that could be a major theme too coming up. And I don't know, I'm not going to go house by house as much in this video because that just gets kind of tedious, and I just don't feel the need to do it. Let's see, we could look at the 4th house though real quick, right? Venus in the 5th here, also here in the D9. Okay, so that's actually fairly empowering for Venus. And it means like, to me, it signifies like getting really involved in like really intense, emotionally charged, passionately, potentially, or passionate and potentially volatile situations, but sort of just like trudging through it, like going through it and just needing to do whatever it is one is going to do. And Venus is also the 11th lord, so there's a lot of this notion of like, there could be this notion too of like friends helping you to take more risks, and like your hopes and dreams really having a big impact on your creativity and expression. And it's going to draw us towards like very artistic things, very like nonlinear things, aesthetic things, of course, all the Venusian sorts of things. It's also a position where a person tends to have affairs with this, so there could be affairs going on and things like that. Yeah, I don't know for sure, but there's definitely some. This could also just be intense things for your children if you have children, and so on. So let's see. Let's see what else we got. What else do I care to say, right? Oh yeah. There was this theme too that I picked up through a bunch of like complex sort of Gemini techniques where I just felt like, again, back to some of the stuff with Mars and the 8th house and stuff, sort of another side of it could be people having sort of a pattern of like of lashing out and stuff and arguing very ideologically and engaging in like very ideological conflicts and stuff, and sort of being disrespectful or just kind of being so obsessed with whatever you're on the warpath for. But then for some reason, I sort of see that kind of fading away. Maybe it's this 8th house influence stuff, but there's sort of like a fading away of becoming dissatisfied with that sort of attitude because it hasn't led you or us anywhere, actually. It's kind of just, it's dawning on us steadily and slowly. Mars is occidental, so it's happening more slowly, more bubbling up from the unconscious. It might be a sting of something that we've done, like the sting that reverberates, that sort of wakes us up and we say, oh shit, I've been being an absolute shit. What have I been doing? So I kind of got a vibe of that, and I don't want to explain all the techniques I looked at like I did in the last video because it just gets like really complicated. So forgive me for that. Um, yeah, I already talked kind of about the 10th house, right? And just the fact that um, there's like a righteous action theme going on, and Jupiter and Mercury cast a powerful trine there too. So there's from the ninth, right? So there's again like that righteous action sort of thing happening with your life, with our professional life, their public life, and so on. And there's, with Saturn there by Navamsha, there's kind of there's a mounting frustration, so to speak. There's a sense of maybe tearing everything down. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I talked a little bit about, I already kind of talked about the 12th house too with Mercury in the 6th, and I talked a little bit about Uranus and Pluto, but I neglected to mention Neptune, and Neptune is actually pretty closely square from Pisces to Jupiter and Mercury, and even the prenatal lunation here. And so what that emphasizes to me is kind of just this theme of deception, right? This theme of deception that Neptune often brings. Deception surrounding like friends who may actually be enemies, or financial opportunities or belief systems, kind of a deception there. And Neptune sort of advises us in a metaphorical way. It's sort of saying, hey, like the reason you're so deceived is because you're thinking about this wrong, you're feeling about this wrong, you're misunderstanding it. There really is no separation. There is no separation. And as long as you're overly emotionally and personally invested in whatever Neptune is around, right, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to be deceived by it. So Neptune is asking us to clear our thoughts away, clear our feelings away, and just see things as they are, but more feel things as they are, more just let things be, let things reveal themselves as they naturally are. And in that sense, it actually does have some minor similarity to Saturn, because Saturn rules over the kind of the highest part of our intellect, which stands aloof and just sees things as they are. But Neptune allows us to actually like feel that connection, like really viscerally feel it and say, oh wow, things are actually not as I thought they were. I now understand it because I am it, not because I merely see it, but I know it, I am it, that kind of a thing. So that's that Neptune piece in there, like whatever enemies you may be fighting, whatever financial opportunities you may misapprehend and so on. Think about it that way too. And along with Mercury, along with Mercury being in Sag with Jupiter too, make sure to pay a little bit more attention to the details of things. Be really clear about communication. Being overly optimistic and intemperate during this period can definitely be a source of troubles, which you'll just have to deal with later. Again, it's not the end of the world. There's good dignity here. Strong planets. Jupiter's very strong other than being in the 6th house. But it is that notion of like really pay attention to the details. Make sure you understand what people are saying, what people are telling you, and read the fine print, all that, because the communication can easily get lost in this Jupiter-Neptune kind of Mars conundrum of just like going head on at full speed without reading the goddamn stop signs and checking for the stoplights and seeing the freaking speed limit. And then pretty soon you're getting pulled over or you're crashing into somebody or something like that. It's a big bloody mess. Again, it won't really, I don't think it'll be quite like that, but for the reasons I've stated. But I think it's interesting too, because Jupiter is right on top of Mars by 12th part here. Very interesting situation. And Mars is right on top of Jupiter practically by 12th part. So there's kind of a hidden connection there. And of course, Jupiter disposits Mars. So Jupiter is kind of behind that martial impulse to break free and do righteous action. And it's just reinforcing all these themes and so on and so forth. And I think that pretty much sums it up. So I hope you liked this video. I hope it was good information and helpful. And I hope you have a great full moon period. Please hit like and subscribe, and please, please, please share this video around. It will really help me if I get more people turned on to my stuff and whatnot. And of course, don't forget to check out my website for services, individual readings, and much more. Okay, thanks guys, and have a great morning, evening, day, whatever it is. All right.